Hello. We are going to continue with our Joshua study, and we are on lesson 4. Before I begin, though, I want to ask you a question. Have any of you ever stolen something? Maybe you saw something you really wanted in a room where nobody was there but you. You found it somewhere where nobody's around to see you, and you thought, I want that. I want to take it. It's exactly something I would love. And so you put it in your pocket and you take it home and you hide it in your room, maybe. Have any of you ever done that? So it's something that after a while, when you think about that thing that you hid, you feel bad about it. You don't enjoy it anymore. In fact, you don't want to go look at it anymore because every time you remember it, you remember that you're a bad person. You feel dirty and like you don't want anyone to find out you did it because then they wouldn't like you. Well, God sees it, though, and you probably think about that too, but you think God might keep it a secret. But God gives you time to change your heart and to confess it. He wants us to. I know in my class, I say, who did this? Raise an honest hand, and someone raise an honest hand. Who did this? And often in my class, they will raise an honest hand. And then my whole class celebrates that they did something hard. And we are impressed because some people are not obedient enough to God's commands to do that. He does want us to. Now, before I go further, I also want to remind you that we said at the beginning of our lessons that Joshua was a military genius. But really, in that he actually is compared to other military geniuses in history like Caesar and Napoleon. But in Joshua's case, he's a military genius because he obeys God's plans. He trusts him and he does the things God even when he doesn't understand what they mean. And that's the kind of military genius that Joshua displays. His trust makes him win battles that nobody could possibly win. So I want you to think about those two things as we begin our new lesson today. And I'm going to begin. So, Joshua and the army of Israel conquered Jericho, as you remember, and everything that was in it, only though because God was with them. The surrounding cities near Jericho probably heard the loud, thunderous crash of Jericho's walls collapsing. The scripture says that the fame of Joshua was noised far abroad. That means all over the area for miles around. He became a famous military person. But it was really something that showed that Joshua's obedience of God himself gave him the power. Jericho can be likened to some bad habit or practice in our life that is standing in our way of living the life of victory and triumph in God's promised land of blessing. We must ask God to help us overcome our Jericho or our area of sin, like stealing something. After the victory at Jericho, Israel's army returned to Gilgal, very pleased with what God had done for them. The people walked around congratulating each other, shaking hands and hugging each other. We have taken the most important city in the Jordan Valley without even a fight. All we had to do was walk around it and shout, amazing! When the Israelite soldiers had walked among the ruins of Jericho, they had seen gold and silver, expensive clothes, pots and kettles made of bronze and iron, and other valuable things. But they were not allowed to take anything for themselves. God had told them clearly, you are not to take any of the spoils or the loot. It's all to be consecrated to me. And it's to put in the treasury of the house of God. Joshua warned the people, making it very plain that if anyone disobeyed, trouble would come. Now, I'm going to share my screen with you, and you're going to be able to see my pictures. Here we go. When the army of Israel was in Jericho, one of the soldiers named Achan saw a beautiful, expensive, imported robe from Babylon, 200 pieces of silver, and a large bar of pure gold. Achan desperately wanted these treasures for himself. After he looked at them for a while, he decided to go ahead and take them secretly. He brought them to his tent, dug a hole in the earth, and buried them. No one saw him take them, and no one saw him bury them in his tent. And therefore, Achan thought that no one would ever find out that he had stolen these items. No one else in the camp of Israel knew what he had done, except his family, and they would not tell. Achan really stole these things from God, for God had clearly said that all the possessions of Jericho were to be dedicated to him. Though Achan thought that no one knew what he had done, God knew, for God sees everything. God sees everything we do, everywhere we go. Of course, God was very displeased and grieved at Achan's sin. Joshua and the other leaders knew they must move farther into the land of Canaan, and they made plans to capture the town of Ai, some people call it, which was a few miles north of Jericho. Before attacking Ai, Joshua sent out men and told them, go up to Ai and gather all the information you can. This is the second time that Joshua sent spies out, but this time he did this on his own. God had not told him to do this. Joshua should have been praying and seeking God's will about how to conquer Ai, but he did not pray about Ai as he did when he prayed about Jericho. When the spies returned, they bragged to Joshua. Ai is just a small town. There's not going to be any problem at all with us conquering them. There's no need to send the entire army. Just send a few hundred soldiers. They'll be enough. Well, Joshua was very encouraged. So he didn't think he even needed to bother God at all about what he wanted him to do. Joshua immediately sent 3,000 soldiers against the little town of Ai, thinking that they could win the battle with little effort. The battle had hardly begun, however, when the Israelite soldiers retreated and were forced to flee, being chased by the men of Ai. About 36 Israelite soldiers were killed. 36 were killed that day. They were struck down. The defeated little army of Israel returned to Gilgal in shame and disgrace. No one now was bragging that Ai was an easy thing to conquer. The soldiers of Israel admitted they were no match for the soldiers of Ai. Ai's army was far superior to theirs. Where were the promises of God? Had God failed them? It sure looked like he had. At this turn of events, the people of Israel lost all their courage, and now it was their time to be paralyzed with fear. Joshua was greatly troubled and disturbed. In deep sorrow and grief, he tore his clothing and fell prostrate to the ground with dust on his head upon his face before the Ark of the Covenant. Why had Israel been defeated? Why had the Lord not helped Israel's army? Where was the captain of the Lord's host who had promised sure victory? It was a long time before Joshua could find words to speak. Finally, he prayed, "Oh, Lord God, why were we defeated? What will be said of Israel when our men run from their enemies? All the heathen people in this land will hear that we have been beaten and will no longer be afraid of us. They will attack us and completely wipe us out. Then what will they think of you, Lord, when they have defeated us who are your people? They will think you are not a very big God. What is the problem, God?" "Get up," the Lord said to Joshua. "Why do you lie there on your face? There is sin in the camp of Israel. Someone has disobeyed my orders and taken some of the treasure of Jericho that was to be consecrated to me. They have also lied about it, hiding it among their belongings. That is why your soldiers were defeated and ran from their enemies in Ai. I will not help Israel until this wicked, evil thing is completely removed from me. Tell the people to cleanse themselves. In the morning, I will show them the thief. Notice that God did not do it right away. He said in the morning. I think he gave people a chance to confess their sin before the morning. Achan should have immediately come and confessed his sin to Joshua, but he didn't. He waited, hoping still that no one would know he was guilty. No one in his family told either. They should have at least done it. We should tell at least someone's guilt. If the person won't, we should be the one to do it. Well, the next morning, the Lord helped Joshua discover the guilty man by having the leader of each tribe come before him. Finally, the individuals within the family of Achan stood before Joshua. At last, Achan stood alone before Joshua. The Lord revealed that Achan was the guilty person, and he was the one responsible for 36 Israelite soldiers who had died. Achan's face turned pale when he heard his name called. He knew then that he could not hide his sin from God. My son, said Joshua kindly. He was actually kind to him. Give glory to the God of Israel and make confession to him. Tell me what you have done and do not hide it from me. Achan trembled and he confessed, I have sinned against the Lord. When I saw the beautiful Babylonian garment, the 200 pieces of silver and a big bar of gold, I wanted it so much that I took it and hid it in the ground under my tent. Now Joshua understood why Israel had been defeated at Ai. There was indeed sin in the camp of Israel, for God had plainly instructed that all the riches or spoils of Jericho were to be consecrated to the Lord. Achan had failed to obey. So Joshua quickly sent men to Achan's tent to get the stolen items. The men dug in the earth and found them hidden under the tent floor, just as Achan had said. The Bible tells us, be sure your sin will find you out. What a sad little pile of stolen possessions. What a shame that Israel had suffered defeat in battle and many good men had been killed just because of a piece of cloth and a few pieces of silver and gold. The men brought all the items to Joshua and laid them on the ground in front of him. Then Joshua and the leaders of Israel took Achan and his family and all his cattle to a nearby valley. Here Joshua said to Achan, Why have you brought calamity upon us? You have made Israel to sin. You have caused our defeat at Ai with 36 Israelites killed. The Lord will now bring calamity upon you. This is sad. Achan may have been sorry, but it was too late. He had to be punished, and he was. He, his family, his cattle, and all that he had were put to death, and a great heap of stones were piled upon them. The stones were left there for many years, and that place was called the Valley of Calamity. This pile of stones served to remind the Israelites that God punishes disobedience, that he will not tolerate any trifling with his commandments. One of God's commands to us, thou shalt not steal. Stealing is a sin. Another one of his commandments is, let him that stole steal no more. If we had stolen something, we need to return it and confess our sin and not do it anymore. After that, we're going to find out what happens with the Israelite army, but we'll study that some more tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Bye.